keep forgetting to introduce myself. I just assume that everybody knows who I am. And I'm going to be your Tai Chi instructor for the day. So we want our feet parallel. We want them shoulder width apart. To get them parallel, basically your toes are pointing forwards. Perhaps you might want to turn them in slightly. So I'll stand back a little bit. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're just going to stand here normally, or what seems normal for you. And just bring the weight forwards a little bit. Chances are it's going to be forwards, it might not be. So that your body weight feels like it's centered on the balls of your feet, the first knuckles of your big toes. And use those as anchor points to lift your toes up. So lift your toes up a little bit, not a lot, about half an inch, maybe less, off the floor. And try and stretch them forwards. But it's not like a vigorous stretch, it's just like opening them out a little bit, as if they've just woken up and they need a little bit of a stretch. And then place, first of all, the big toes back down on the floor. And then follow those with the next pair of toes. I don't know what they're called. And then the next pair, and the next pair, and the little toes. And then continue that movement so you're securing the outside edges of your feet into the floor, and then the heels as well. And you're keeping the weight centered on the balls of the feet. We're just making sure we've got a nice strong structure in the feet when we start. Keeping that structure, use that as your cue. Once you get into the heel, use that as your cue to soften the heels, soften the ankles, soften the knees, and soften the hips. So your legs will automatically bend a little bit, but you're not physically bending your legs, you're just relaxing them. Obviously not completely, otherwise you'd be in a big puddle on the floor. Still keeping your weight centered on the balls of the feet, still keeping that strong structure in the feet. Not too strong, so you're not clawing the floor, it's just well, we use the word pung in Tai Chi. It's a Chinese word which basically means a gentle stretching through relaxation. Now, the next thing that you want to do is to try to elongate the spine. Okay, so in order to do that, you need to think about something else. The something else is perhaps have the goal of making the top of your head touch your ceiling. And then you will engage the necessary muscles to make that happen, which just happen to also cause your spine to stretch, especially if your legs are relaxed. So avoid, oh, okay, I'm going to move my head upwards, I'm going to straighten my legs out. Keep the legs relaxed, but just use everything else to try and lift the head up. This gives you a good general stretch in the spine. We're going to do a more detailed stretch in the spine in a moment. But first of all, I'd like you just to check that with your arms hanging like a pair of curtains, so they're just hanging there, there's no effort in them or anything, no tension. Just check where your hands are. If your hands aren't just in front of your body, which they probably won't be, then you just want to move the pelvis backwards and lean at the same time. So you're leaning from the hips and moving the pelvis backwards so that your weight stays centered on the balls of the feet. Otherwise, if you move the pelvis backwards, your weight goes into the heels. So that's the other way of doing it, is move the pelvis backwards a bit until the weight goes into the heels, and then lean forwards a little bit from the hips until the weight goes back into the balls of the feet. And then what will happen is your arms will hang just in front of you. If I stand like this, you can see I've got a slight lean from the hips. What this does is it shifts the center of gravity out of the small of the back, brings it into the abs. The abs are much more attuned to supporting weight, doing that kind of work, than your spine is. It also, in conjunction with soft legs, causes gravity to pull the pelvis down, and it corrects its position a little bit more. So it takes the tension out of the lower back by doing this. It also feels as if you're sticking your bum out a little bit. That's just a normal feeling. And as you just saw with me, okay, my bum's sticking out slightly, but not a lot. It's certainly not as much as it feels like. Now we're going to do a little bit more detailed stretch in the spine. So keeping the shoulders and the arms soft. Just imagine you have a ball, a little ping pong ball in the middle of your belly, and it's just resting up against the spine. And of its own accord, it's going to roll up the front of your spine. And as it does so, I'd like you to try and stretch that part of the spine. So it's kind of like causing the spine to unfurl a little bit, like a fern would. Right the way up the front of the spine, right the way through the neck into the seat of the skull. So it'll bring your head back a little bit. It will probably also cause the chest to lift up a little bit, which we'll deal with in a moment. So the head really needs to be back on top of the shoulders. And if you find yourself naturally looking up when you're doing this, then that means that the back of your neck is shrunk slightly. We need to do a little bit of a correction on that. Okay, so mine is, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to just tilt the head, but stretch the back of the neck. So I'm here, maybe I should come a bit closer. So I'm here like this, and the back of my neck is a little bit shrunk. So I'm just going to elongate it by lifting up this part of the skull upwards. But I'm not going to look down, and I'm not going to look up. I'm just doing that so that I'm looking horizontal. And you can see my chest is still sticking out a little bit, which we need to deal with next. What do? Well, you just try to move the sternum down towards the belly. What that will do, of course, is, due to stiffness in the chest area, cause the head to come forwards again. So you've got to fight it. You've got to try and keep the head back, try and keep the spine stretched, but soften the sternum down. It's got muscles around it, and they're just tight. If it's not moving, it's just because the muscles are tight, tense. So we're just trying to loosen that off. Okay, pause there for a moment. I think I've got somebody waiting in the waiting room. So I'm going to bring them in. It's Erica. So hold that position if you can. Yeah, good. Hold that position if you can. So keeping that stance, keeping that posture, we're going to start to limbo up the hip joints now as well. So basically we've worked on the most important joints probably, which are the string of joints that we call our spine. Now we're going to work on these joints here. So all I'm going to get you to do is to move the hips backwards and forwards by rotating the pelvis backwards and forwards. So keep your knees, what's really important about this is to keep your knees pointing forwards. Don't allow them to come in. So just try to, you may have to use a little bit of conscious effort on that, making sure that you don't pull your knee in. Usually what causes that is a tight hip joint. And we're actually just trying to loosen off the hip joints. So it's kind of a bit of a paradox, I suppose. So you have to focus elsewhere than the hip, which is usually the knee. So you're just trying to keep the knee pointing in the same direction as the toes. And make sure that your bodily movement is coming from the pelvis. So if you can't move your pelvis because the hips are stiff or whatever, then nothing should be moving. We're not moving the shoulders. It's not being pulled by the shoulders. It's just the pelvis doing the movement and everything is following it. So that's probably one of the first golden rules that you ever get in Tai Chi, is all your movement should be originating in the pelvic cavity, in the dantian, actually, we call it. Sometimes they call it the yao, which is your waist, but the dantian really is the point of where it starts, which is in the middle of the pelvic cavity, in the middle of the belly. So the arms are still relaxed. Yeah, they're just flailing around like a pair of curtains in the wind, and doing their own thing. So whatever they do, that's what they do. Don't worry if they're not doing the same thing as mine are doing. So this has the benefit of opening the hip joints, so getting them open and closed, really just gets them moving. It warms up the fluid, synovial fluid that's in there, which we want to do before we do any exercises, any kind of exercises, you want to get warmed up a bit. So this has that function as well. But the series of exercises that we're doing for our warm-up is doing more than that. We're trying to open, we're trying to create space in the joints. So a lot of people translate Tai Chi as meaning grand ultimate, and then Tai Chi Chuan, which is the martial art of Tai Chi, grand ultimate boxing or grand ultimate fist. But it's probably a poor translation, really, and actually Tai Chi means big in this sense. So we want to apply that to everything, really. We want to make our joints big. And we want to make the movement originate in the belly. So just stick with that for a bit. Now for me, I find this really relaxing, doing this movement. It's almost kind of like comforting with me. So if you're finding that, then just go with it. And sometimes, if you decide that you're going to practice what we're learning today. And so therefore you do this exercise to begin with. And then you can get lost in it. You can go, well, I don't know what I was going to do next. That's okay. Just carry on doing this. It's a really therapeutic exercise. And actually that first bit that we did, which was getting us into that initial stance, initial posture, which is called the Wuji stance or Wuji stance wang. That's really therapeutic. So just doing that, and then, if you think to yourself, I don't know what I'm going to do next, that's fine. Just stay like that. That's okay. Until something pops up into your mind. Okay, let's just let ourselves sort of come to a rest, but we still want to try and stay in this stance, in this Wuji stance. So Tai Chi means, that's Taiji, not Tai Chi, but Taiji. That means big. Wuji means small. Actually, it means nothing, or empty, or beginning. And this is the stance that you would start off Tai Chi form in, the beginning of the form. But all of the other meanings have an application in this stance. So you take on board all of those meanings, and they have an interpretation of what you're doing. So emptiness, for example, you really want to empty your mind of thought. You want to empty your body of any tension. Okay, so we've worked the hips. We're still working the spine, hopefully. Yeah, we're still getting a little bit of nanometers of stretch in the spine because of the way we're standing. That is, we've taken the weight. The small of the back is no longer bearing our weight. It's in the abs. Therefore, the spine is free to open a little bit. Gravity is pulling the pelvis down because the legs are soft. So those two together, your spine is free to open, and it's being pulled down by your pelvis through the action of gravity, and you're trying to get your head to touch the ceiling, so you have two opposing forces stretching the spine a little bit. We've loosened off the hips. Now we're going to loosen off the shoulders, but we'll continue doing that exercise with the hips at the same time. So it's the same exercise as this, but we're going to engage the shoulders as well. So how we start with this is just an in-breath, any old how, and stretching and trying to touch the ceiling. Now, if you're as tall as me, then you will succeed in touching the ceiling, or you may, depending on how tall your ceiling is. If you do, then just sink a little bit deeper in the legs if you can, so that you're not touching the ceiling. If you don't worry about it, it's okay. Try and get straight arms, but if you can't, don't worry about that either. Just do what you can do, okay? If you are starting to get pain in the shoulders, it's because they're stiff or they're tense. So try softening off the shoulders a little bit, but stretching through the sides of the body. So you're trying to separate the ribs through the side of the body, through the sides of the body, but the shoulders aren't doing a lot. And then you're trying to elongate the arms a little bit. But nothing here is vigorous. It's just a gentle stretch. Okay. And then just slowly start this turning of the pelvis and rotating the shoulder joints in opposite directions, so that by the time you're facing the side, or as far around to the side as you can get, the arms are horizontal. And then when you come back to the middle, you carry on rotating so that the fingers are pointing towards the ground, and then you overshoot and go around the other way. So then once again, the arms are horizontal, and then you bring yourself back to facing forwards, arms vertical, and just carry on like that, really. So there's a bit of coordination required in getting this perfectly right, which you don't have to worry about. All you need to think about, really, or make sure is happening, is that you have, excuse me, an elongation effect, a gentle stretch coming down the arms or along the arms from the shoulders right the way through to the fingertips. Plus, you're rotating the shoulder joints. So those are the two key ingredients. Plus, on top of that, Wuji stance, the sort of standard Wuji stance and posture, and opening and closing the hips by turning the pelvis from one side to the other. And also bearing in mind, maintaining that knee pointing forwards, not allowing it to turn in. And if that's not enough, smile as well. So now hopefully we're getting the fluid in the shoulder joints warmed up a little bit. None of this is vigorous, but it can be quite painful. That's not to suggest that it should be, but it can get a little bit uncomfortable. That's quite normal, but if you get a stabbing pain anywhere, stop. All right, so the next time you're facing forwards with the arms hanging down, just pause for a moment. Try and remember which direction you're going in so that you can go back in the opposite direction. And away you go. So we'll just do a few more reps in the opposite direction. And if you can't remember what direction you were going in, well, don't worry about it. Just go in the direction. Any old direction. There's only two to choose from. Okay, and then the next time your arms are down by the side and you're facing forwards, just pause there. So now we've warmed up the hip joints and the shoulder joints. We've stretched them open and we stretched open the spine as well. We should hopefully be a little bit warm now, as well as stretched. We're going to do shaking out of the hands and the feet. So to do this, you're just going to round the shoulders forwards, so the arms cross in front of the midline of the body, keeping the arms relatively soft. And then use the shoulders to send gentle pulses down the arms right the way through to the fingertips. So it's as if you've got your arms are a pair of skipping ropes or a pair of whips, and you're just sending a wave down them. Gently. This has a number of effects. For example, mobilizes the lymph through the arms and the blood. Has a sort of a peristaltic effect. Now we need to do a similar thing with our feet, but obviously we can't do it with both feet at the same time. So I'm moving across to my fireplace, find something equally secured to the floor that can take your weight if need be, but you don't have to lean on it, you just need to touch it so that you've got that security there. Stand with the feet together, parallel, and then lift one of your feet up, either one, about ½ an inch, and move it forward a foot length. And then tilt at the heel, so pivot your heel, so that your toes are trying to point towards the ceiling, and then try and stretch the toes as well. So a nice stretch of the foot from the heel right the way down to the tips of the toes, and then combine that with a stretch coming from the bum down the back of the leg into the heel, through into the ground. So it's almost like you're trying to push the heel into the ground, but it's never going to quite make it because it's a little bit off the ground. So that is all the important stuff. Then the gravy is to shake as well. So keeping that leg in that sort of position, you're going to shake up and down over the hip joint if you can. If you can't, it doesn't matter. But you can try. And then place that foot back down alongside the other one and swap over. So lift the other one up ½ an inch off the floor, move it forwards a foot length, tilt it at the heel so that the toes are pointing or trying to point towards the ceiling. Stretch down the back of your leg from the bum through to the heel, and then shake that out of the hip joint. If you're managing it, if you're succeeding in a shake, then you'll find that your leg is vibrating up and down, but also you get some vibration in the pelvic cavity as well. And then place that foot down alongside. Now's a good time to have a sip of drink if you want to. I'm going to have a sip of drink, and then I've got something I wanted to say. And I'm saying that because to remind myself to remember to say it. So something that's cropped up in what I'm saying a few times now has been, if you can't do it, it doesn't matter. So I want to just state that again. Anything that we're doing, if you can't do it, it doesn't matter. One of the big things about Tai Chi that people say Tai Chi is good for is for de-stressing, for relieving anxiety, that kind of stuff. So the last thing you want to do is get anxious about something you can't do, because that just completely negates everything that you're doing. So remember, try and do something, and if you can't, don't worry about it. It's okay. You're just not ready yet, but just keep trying, and eventually you'll get there. It's like a toddler learning to walk, who's not quite a toddler yet. They just keep trying. My son used to get really angry, but he kept trying, and I'd like you to keep trying without getting really angry, if you will. Okay, I'm just going to pause for a moment because there's something that I need to do. I apologize. So I'm just going to pause the recording. So while I'm doing that, if you have... So what's cropped up then is somebody's getting a little bit dizzy when we're doing this exercise, for example, and potentially it's because of the balance function of the ears not quite coping with it. Try looking forwards all the time. Yeah, so try finding a point on the wall or something and fixating your focus your eyes on it, focus it as a target so that you're not moving your head, and hopefully that will help. If it doesn't, then what I would suggest is it's not got anything to do with your ears, and it's more likely to do with an effect that some people get when they're doing this stuff, which I've told a number of you about before, which is, it feels to me, I've had it before, you see, it feels to me like either my blood pressure is dropping or my blood sugar levels are dropping. If you've ever had that, you kind of feel a bit faint and woozy and possibly dizzy. And that can happen to you when you're doing any of these exercises, actually. And what I would say is, if you get that, please sit down. If that happens to you, please sit down like this. Just find a seat. I'm going to sit on the edge of on the arm of the chair, the settee, and just make sure you're sat forward. So some of the weight of your body is in your feet, and you can rest the backs of your hands on your legs, or just have them hanging down. And if you still get a problem, if you're still quite woozy feeling, in which case it's probably quite bad, then bring the knees together and just bring your head down a little bit, and just stay like that until you start to feel better. That will help you. But only do that if it's really bad. Just staying sat down and calm should help. Okay, so those are the possibilities that you could be experiencing there. All right, now, let's do some Tai Chi walking, shall we? There are a number of things that you have to do in preparation for getting Tai Chi right. And usually we just sort of dive in at the deep end and learn Tai Chi form and start moving around, and gradually we're improving how we move around. But it's quite tricky to learn Tai Chi form in this format. So I'm just teaching you the foundational stuff, which you would learn through doing Tai Chi form anyway. And one of the things I think is really important for you guys is this Tai Chi walking, which is absolutely fundamental to Tai Chi. So what I'm going to get you to do is to stand again in this Wuji stance. So the feet are parallel, shoulder width apart, toes are pointing forwards. We've got a nice structure in the feet, nice strong structure, but not tense in the feet. Soft legs. Your bum is above the heels, but you're leaning forwards from the hips so that the weight is centered on the balls of the feet. The arms are just hanging. Nice stretch in the spine by trying to make the top of the head touch the ceiling. And then we're going to have a go at doing some special Tai Chi walking. I've been reading a book on the Tai Chi classics today, and it cropped up in there. They actually called it cat walking. I didn't realize that. I always just called it Tai Chi walking. So this is what we're going to do. We're just going to start here and shift the weight across. So you shift your body weight into your right foot. You don't have to physically move the body, but it helps. Yeah, so but whatever works for you, just try and get all of your body weight in your right foot. All of it. Every last ounce of your body weight in your right foot, so that there's no body weight in your left foot, so that you can lift the left foot up and place it in front of you, still with no body weight. Well, actually, there is a little bit of body weight. There's the weight of your foot. Yeah. So you're just placing the foot down on the ground, almost like pawing it like a cat. Yeah. Once that is resting on the floor, shift your weight forwards and across into it. So now you're moving your weight into your left foot, taking it out of your right foot. Bring it right the way across and try and bring your weight so that it's over the ball of the foot. You'll feel it when you get it right, when you get the sweet spot. And then your right foot is free to move and step forwards. You're still keeping this distance between them widthways, but they're stepping forwards. So now my right foot's on the floor, but there's no weight in it. I've still got the weight in this foot. So from a martial aspect, Tai Chi Chuan is a martial art. We want to always have a foot free so that we can kick somebody. Yeah. Now, if I have weight in that, that means I have to move. And you saw I did have to move a little bit, so I'd already put some weight in it. But that's the martial application for it. Okay. Then we shift our weight forwards and across into the right foot. Bring the weight right the way over the ball of the foot. Why? Because if it's not, you'll lose your balance. There. And then step again with the left foot. Again, you're pawing the ground, pawing the floor. It's almost like you're feeling the floor with your foot, but there's no weight in it. Then shift your weight forwards. Feel the relief in your thigh muscles as you do so. So shifting the weight into the left side. So it's entirely in the left side. Again, completely over the ball of the foot. Lift the left foot off the ground, place it in front of you. So still, I have not a lot going on in my arms. I'm not really thinking about what they're doing. I'm just thinking about my feet and shifting my body weight between them. So once you've had a go at a few steps, see if you can just do this by rote. Yeah, so just try and walk like this. So that we're not putting body weight into a foot that's not on the ground or on the floor. Now, when you reach the end of your room, like what I'm doing right now, you have a choice. You can either turn around and go back the other way, or you can do as I'm doing and go back to the start again. It all depends on your own personal preferences, really. So keep going with this. Remember, it's not just about the feet and shifting the body weight. You also want to have this good posture. So you're still leaning forward slightly from the hips all the way through. You're still trying to make the top of your head touch the ceiling. You're still keeping the legs soft. You've still sunk in the chest a little bit, in the sternum. When I say sunk, I mean it's coming down, not back. And although you do have a lot of attention in your feet, try to avoid looking at them. So this is, okay, aside from the fact that we're doing things slightly differently, the shape of the walking that we're doing is essentially normal walking. This isn't really Tai Chi. You wouldn't be doing, you wouldn't have these foot positioning that we have in Tai Chi for a variety of reasons, which I'm not going to go into right now. But this is a really good starting point. So if you don't remember anything else about today's session, remember this part, because this is a really good exercise to practice. And yes, okay, you need to be a little bit warmed up ideally before you start doing it. If you can't remember the warm-up exercises that we did, do something else to warm up. But otherwise, this is really foundational stuff. Because in Tai Chi, we step a lot. We do stepping. So pussycat stepping is the way to do it. Of course, we've only got 2 feet, which is a disadvantage, I guess. So, as I said, keeping the body weight over the foot, over the ball of the foot, when you decide that it's going to properly take your weight, is absolutely crucial for good balance. And this is physics we're talking about here, just plain old physics. If your center of gravity is not over your supporting whatever it is, platform, it's going to topple over, or there's a possibility that it will. So if you take a step forwards and step onto ice, then you're going to go unless you are absolutely perfectly over your foot. You're going to go somewhere that you don't want to go. Of course, I don't recommend that you try it, but perhaps it's worth considering that you should feel safer when you're walking like this. Okay, well, and then you might say, well, but I'm not going to go outside and walk like this. It looks stupid. Well, I suppose it does a little bit when you're going slowly and considering each part of the movement, or each part of each movement. It's going to look a bit daft if you're doing that. But after you've practiced it for a while, and you can just do it, then all of a sudden it can look just like normal walking. You know, everybody walks slightly differently anyway. You can, you know, you're relearning to walk in a way which is safer. You're less likely to lose your balance. You're more likely to keep your balance, should I say. You're more likely to stay upright, notwithstanding any other factors that may come into play. So you can walk just looking normal once you've practiced it a while. That's not Tai Chi walking, of course, but it's walking with balance, shall we say. So let's turn that into Tai Chi walking, because there are further benefits that you can get from doing these steps properly. Yeah. What I'm going to get you to do, I think, is this. We're going to bring the pelvis back into it. Yeah, so remember at the start, we're doing this with the pelvis. Well, we're going to combine that with that straightforward walking that we were just doing. Let me show you what I mean. So I'm going to start off in this Wuji stance. And as I shift my weight across into my right foot, I close my right hip, open my left one by turning the pelvis. The navel goes over there, points over in that direction, so that this hip joint is as close as it can get today. And this hip joint is as open as it can get today by the time I've got all my weight in the right side. And then I step. And then I'm going to shift my weight across, as before, into the left side, across and forward, should I say. And at the same time, I'm going to turn my pelvis so that I'm closing the left hip, so that it's fully closed by the time my weight is fully in the left foot. And this hip is as open as it's going to get doing this when the weight is out of the right foot. And now I can step forwards with the right foot. And then shift my weight forwards, turning the pelvis, closing the hip that I'm putting the weight into, so that when all of the weight is in that side, that hip is as close as it's going to get. And then I step. And then I go back that way. And then I step. And then I go back this way. So now we're starting to bring some proper Tai Chi movements into what we're doing, because we're starting to move the pelvic cavity. We're starting to move the waist, the yao, and the dantian. This is good. So again, as soon as you get to the end of your space, either turn around and go back the other way, or go back to the start. Or if you've got a square space, perhaps you can go along in the westerly direction, perhaps, or something. Just see if you can make the most of the space that you've got. So whenever you start off, so when you change direction, if you find that you have to start off again, please start by moving the weight into the right foot. Yeah. The reason I say this is because we use this sequence of movements at the very beginning of the form that I teach. So should you ever find yourself learning the form with me, Tai Chi form with me, then you'll already have some of these movements stored in muscle memory so that you're good to go, which would be really nice. So again, we've got this oscillation, as we engineers would say, going on. So make sure you're looking forwards all the time, in case you've got any problems with the ears. Maybe you've got some crystals in your, whatever the fluid's called in the eardrum, which can cause your balance to go. And as ever, if you are starting to feel a little bit woozy, just grab a seat. and keep going. So one more time for me. So I remember a while ago I went to a Tai Chi teacher who'd kind of got half of this but missed half of it. But the bit that they'd got was really interesting, their interpretation, which you might find interesting too, which is that, you know, this is called cat walking. Think about the catwalk. Yeah, the supermodels walking along the catwalk. Well, supermodels walking along the catwalk, in these terms, do it wrong because they thrust the pelvis forwards. Okay, I'm overdoing it a little bit, but they kind of walk like this. We don't want to be doing that because that's putting pressure on the lower back. We want to keep forwards a little bit from the hips. But they are moving the pelvis, you know, they are turning the pelvis as they walk, which is kind of what we're doing. We're just sort of breaking it down into a lot more detail and making sure that we're getting the right components in the right places at the right time. So there's another thing cropping up from the Tai Chi classics. Foundation is that, you know, you should always be doing the right thing in the right place at the right time. When you've got all of those three things together, then you've got Tai Chi. If they're out of alignment, then you haven't got Tai Chi. So what we're working towards is a movement called earthquake. Some of you may remember me saying that before. But there's a little bit extra to do with this. We need to do something with the hands and the arms as well. So what I'm going to get you to do is, rather than standing in Wuji, we're going to stand in Taiji. Now, Taiji is slightly different. You need to be a little bit more sunk. A little bit more sunk. So maybe, you know, maybe for Wuji you sunk an inch. You went down about an inch in the legs, softened them so that your pelvis went down by about an inch. In Taiji, you go down by 2 inches, let's say. So try that and see what the knees are like, see what the legs feel like. If it feels like it's going to become uncomfortable, then come out of it a little bit, yeah? So you want to keep it easy, yeah? Okay, you want a little bit of challenge, but you don't want it to be such that it's going to be too difficult for you. So, but that's what I would go with. Then the arms and hands are doing something different. They're not just dangling around. We've got some activity in them. So you kind of elongate the arms, you're stretching the shoulders out sideways and making this stretch go in a spiral down the outside of the arms, around the outside of the arms. So you've kind of got like 2 spirals going in opposite directions and coming out the ends of your fingers. So one way of thinking of it, and of course it's not quite correct, but you can think of, you've got like a couple of corkscrews, the one going in the opposite direction than the other. The hands are sort of sat roughly in front of where your hip joints are. So they're level with it, they're in front. Let me come in close so you can see the shape of my arm and hand. So the fingers are turning in a little bit towards each other, and they're turning up a little bit as well, particularly on the outside. So we're trying to make sure that the palms aren't pointing in towards the body. That's something we always want to avoid. And they're sat in front of the hip joints. So you're sunk, the shoulders are soft, but they're stretching, or they're shifting, trying to shift apart sideways a little bit. And then that's sort of going around in a spiral around the arms. So this is the Tai Chi stance. And this in itself is an exercise, a standing exercise, just like the Wuji stance is. So, you know, if you remember how to do this and think, okay, I'm going to stand in Tai Chi, and then you can't think what else you're going to do next, then just standing like this has its therapeutic value. But we're going to do something else. In fact, we're going to do exactly the same thing as we did, but we've got some hand movement as well. So I'm just going to let go of my arms and remind you, I shift my weight across to the right foot and I turn the pelvis so that the right hip closes, the left hip opens. The hands need to follow the hips. Let me show you. So when my left hip moves forwards, I send my left hand out in a kind of circle. It's going out and forwards. And my right hand comes back in towards the hip joint. So you're in this position. Let me come in closer. You're in this position by the time all your weight's in the right side. Okay. Have a look. Shifting the weight across, turning the pelvis, sending the left hand out. Stepping then and only then with the left foot, because you can't move your left foot until all the weight's out of it. Then we do the opposite thing, you know? We turn the pelvis back, we shift the weight into the left side, and we send the right hand out. So that when all the weight's in the left foot, the left hip is fully closed, the left hand is right next to it, the right hip is fully open, and the right hand is sent out. And then we step forwards with the right foot. Empty, as we say, there's no weight in it. And then we do it back again, that way, and then step, and then that way, and then step. So this is, you know, in terms of the number of things that are going on in your body, it's a bit like playing a set of drums. So go easy on yourself if you're thinking, I don't know what to do, or if it's just not coming together for you. Start off with what we've already started with, which was with the pelvis and the stepping, and then try to bring the hands in. So, you know, you could start off by just going, I'm struggling to do this actually because I've been doing it the right way for so long, it just wants to go. But you can start off just by doing that for a few paces, and then see if you can bring the hands in as well. So your hands are following the pelvis, not the foot. The foot is kind of slightly out of sync with it. Again, don't beat yourself up if you think, I can't do this. Of course you can't do it. That's why you're learning how to do it. And you can do all the components because we've just done them. It's really quite an advanced movement, actually. And the early Tai Chi masters that came to the West chose to drop it from the form. They never taught it. It's right at the start of the form, and it's the most challenging part of the form, but also it's really therapeutic, and it's excellent for getting your walking coordinated or re-coordinated. One more go, I think, before we finish up. So sending the hand out, turning the pelvis, closing the right hip, opening the left hip, stepping forwards with the left foot, shifting the weight across into the left side, closing the left hip, drawing back with the left hand and sending out with the right hand, stepping forwards with the right foot, all the way back again, all the way back again. You're doing fantastically, folks, honestly. Okay, so coming back to your favorite spot in the room, standing, feet parallel, shoulder width apart in Wuji. Legs just slightly soft. Arms are just hanging there. A nice gentle stretch in the spine. round the shoulders forward so the arms cross in front of the middle of the body, and shake the hands out. And smile. And then find your reliable, stable object that's attached to the ground. Just touch. We're going to shake the feet out. So you're standing with the feet together. Pick a foot, any foot, lift it off the ground by about 1/2 inch. Move it forwards a foot length and then tilt it at the heel so that the toes are trying to point towards the ceiling, and then elongate the toes from the heel right the way to the tips of the toes, elongating the feet, the foot, should I say. And then stretch down the back of the leg from the bum through to the heel, and then shake through the leg, through the back of the leg, from the bum through to the heel. Give it a good shake. And then place your feet back together again, and then do the same on the other side. Lifting it up, moving it forwards a foot length, tilting it at the heel, elongating the foot from the heel right the way through to the tips of the toes, stretching the back of the leg from the bum down to the heel, and then jiggle that a bit. Okay, I'd like us to do one last exercise, if you will. I know we've kind of hit our time limit, but we paused in the middle there a little bit and we paused at the start, so I think we've got a few minutes spare. So just coming back to where you were, standing in Wuji. We're just going to do a very gentle exercise here that's really helpful when you're finishing off. If you do any vigorous exercise just before bed, you'll struggle to sleep, so it's good to sort of calm down a bit, and this helps. So standing in Wuji, so the same thing, you're trying to get the top of the head to touch the ceiling. The legs are a little bit soft, the weight's in the balls of the feet, you're leaning a little bit forwards from the hips. Then you're going to elongate the arms gently, just a gentle elongation from the shoulder joints through to the tips of the fingers. So they're still soft, but they've got some substance to them. And then rotate the arms and the shoulder joints until the palms are facing forwards, and then try and move the hands out sideways. But of course, they're attached to your arms, and therefore they're going to rise up. But you're just trying to move them sideways. Until they get to about, well, I've got mine at about 60 degrees, but maybe 45 degrees, between 45 and 60 degrees. And then rotate the arms again a little bit further so that you're starting to open up the elbow joints, and the palms, if they were flat, would be facing towards the ceiling, but they're kind of facing outwards as well. And then we're just going to bend at the elbows. Sorry about that, my screen is telling me that my internet connection is unstable, so I just thought I'd pause there and wait for you guys to catch up. So see if you can keep the hands soft, but flat. So a little bit of a gentle stretch in them. Make sure the palms aren't turning in, make sure they're turning a little bit away and down towards the ground, and then just move everything downwards, keeping the elbows out to the sides. Ooh. And then rotate the arms again so the palms are facing forwards, and then try and shift the hands out sideways again till you get to about 60 degrees. Rotate the arms again so that you're opening the elbow joints. Palms are roughly facing the ceiling, and then bend at the elbows to make this apex just in front of the throat. The fingers don't actually touch, they're just, just off touching, and then pushing down. I'm going to come in close so you can see a little bit better. There we are. So rotating and then sending the hands out sideways. Then rotating again so that the palms are facing roughly towards the ceiling, and then bending at the elbows to make this apex. and then pushing gently downwards, but also pushing the top of the head upwards still. So you have opposing forces between the hands and the body. Make sure the palms never turn in towards the body, they're always away from the body. And then rotating again. Coming out sideways, rotating a bit more, bending at the elbows to make the apex, and then pushing downwards. So it's quite normal if you don't feel any different sensations than normal, but it's also quite normal to get kind of a prickly feeling in the hands, or a tingly feeling, or sweat, or cold, or hot. These are all typical responses from this kind of exercise. So always you're trying to gently elongate the arms. Always. Elbows out sideways as we're pushing down. Shifting the hands out sideways, rotating the arms so that you can feel the elbow joints opening, and then bending the elbows, and then pushing down. At the same time as pushing the top of the head up. At the same time as keeping your legs relaxed. One more go round. Shifting the hands out sideways, rotating, opening the elbow joints, bending at the elbows, sending down, sending up for the top of the head. And then, when you get to the bottom of the hands, when the hands reach their full extent going down, just relax the arms. Just relax the arms. Well done, folks. You've worked really hard. What you've done is, in my belief, very therapeutic. And you need